Charity, good to
Good
see you.
morning.
Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. Appreciate that. I know that you're busy, so I thank you for making a bit of time for me. I wanted to kick off by asking you about a statement that you made to me a little while ago, which really intrigued me, such that I've gone away and done a bit of reading actually, because I was so interested in what you were talking about. You said what we've been doing hasn't been working. Why did you say that, and why does that matter? Just tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for the chance to have a conversation today. And things like this are really important because if we don't ever take time to stop and look at what we're currently doing and really be honest with ourselves about what we define as working or not working, that definition is really important. If we don't take a chance to really reflect on that, then we just keep going. And then we just get more and more of the same and wonder why we're getting the same outcomes that we call not working. So my specialty field is mental health, and I'm a licensed counselor in the state of Colorado out in the United States of America. And we also run a psilocybin microdosing practice along with our mental health counseling practice. And the reason that we've done that is because we looked at the mental health industry and said, what is happening here is not working. If we're going to define working as people being more content in their lives, feeling that they are getting what they want out of their lives, operating in ways that they have healthy relationships and healthy outcomes, then all of that is not happening for the most part.
Before we get into that, because I want to explore that a little bit, but just explain for people that don't know about it, about microdosing. I mean, just explain what that if you like. I mean, I was about to call
Yeah.
it technology. It is a kind of technology, but tell people about what that is. Explain that.
Yeah, a modality might be a different word
Yeah.
for it. But yeah, so psilocybin is a psychoactive mushroom. It is what actually a component of a mushroom from the Psilocybe cubensis species. And psilocybin, when it enters the body, is metabolized into psilocin, which is that active metabolite. That metabolite connects directly with our 5-HT2A serotonin receptor. And that is kind of our core hub of the serotonin system, which controls a lot of things throughout the body. But the way that psilocybin impacts the body is it can impacts the areas of the brain directly connected to how we think. That's my fastest way to describe it. As we think, so we are.
Okay.
And when we use the mushroom and use it in small doses, that's what we call microdosing, a dose where you are enhanced in how you're showing up, your brain is a little quieter, your executive functioning is heightened, more focused, more creative, but you're also still driving a car, going to work, doing all of your daily things. That's just what we call microdosing. I say you're enhanced, but you're not altered. A lot of the conversation around psilocybin is in these macro experiences where people go and sit with a therapist or a facilitator of some sort and take a very large dose and have a significant hallucinogenic experience that they then take away some meaning from and do some therapeutic work. Or not. Maybe they go to Burning Man instead and use mushrooms in a more concert or recreational stance. But with microdosing, we're able to really look at how does psilocybin impact the brain in those small ways to enhance neuroplasticity so that the brain is structurally changing. So therefore, the way the person thinks and perceives and understands the world is changed, getting away from some of that rigid thought and moving forward. So that's
And
kind
so
of
what
the
you're saying, just so I understand this correctly, what you're saying is that talking therapies aren't enough on their own. This enhances what you can do with talking therapies. Is that essentially it in a summary?
exactly. Exactly. Talk therapy is one of those things that we look at and say, this is not working. And maybe a way to reframe that is it's not enough. It's a
Yeah.
piece, it's a
Yeah.
tool. But that alone doesn't change how people legitimately process information. And the mental health industry has tried to come up with a bunch of different ways from magnets and tapping and pharmaceuticals and all these various things to try and kind of trick the brain into this neuroplastic environment of change. And those things have not been working. We're just going around and around and around and touching little things here and there, but not legitimately changing the structure of the brain so that it can then functionally shift.
Yeah.
The
And
brain
you,
yeah,
and
go
just
ahead.
again, just for people that are listening, you've created a, if you like, a complementary business, which you've called Grow Your Own Thoughts, which I love the title of that. Just explain a little bit. I mean, I think people get what talking therapies are. I mean, they may not
Right.
get the detail, but
We all know
just
that.
explain what Grow Your Own Thoughts is all about.
Yeah, so Grow Your Own Thoughts was really birthed from the recognition that talk therapy alone doesn't work. if we look at how the brain functions and processes information, thought becomes very rigid over time. When a baby is born into the world, it is open to learning
Yeah.
whatever. The brain wants to learn, it wants to take in information, it wants to understand how to survive, and it wants to understand how to survive efficiently. What is the lowest output for the maximum input when it comes to that efficiency of survival? So when we look at how the brain tries to do that, when we're born, there's a lot of that neuroplasticity. The brain is a sponge, it's taking in information. As we go across experiences, education, culture, learning, all of these different aspects of life, the brain takes in that information and says, oh, this is how I understand how to survive in this world, whether it's social, physical, emotional, all of those things connected for the ultimate survival process. In doing that, though, the brain becomes rigid
Right.
and it stops allowing new information in. It takes information, references it against the information it currently has, and says yay or nay. So, grow your own thoughts started as a tagline that we trademarked, built on that idea of A, growing mushrooms, but B, also the neuroplasticity, meaning you're growing new neural connections. New
Right.
connections are being made in the brain to perceive information differently. And that's how Grow Your Own Thoughts was started. Became a company because we were in the right place at the right time in the state of Colorado in the year of 2022 when science was catching up with the political
Yeah.
spectrum. And the state of Colorado decided, yes, we're going to allow for there to be personal use and also regulated use of psilocybin within the state of Colorado. So,
So you've got two companies. One company that provides the kind of talk therapy, and another company that provides mushrooms. That people, you send them a kit and they take it away. They grow their own stuff. That's essentially how
exactly.
it works. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And tell me about why the two things. I mean, it's just explaining a bit more detail. Why do the two things work so well together? Because that's what you're saying. Is
Yes.
it's not one or the other. It's that you bring the two together and you have significantly better results. That's your essentially what you're getting at. Is that?
Absolutely. Yes. So if we're going to change the structure of the brain and open it up to new ideas and new perspectives, where is that new information coming from? So psilocybin quiets down that part of the brain that is called the default mode network, and it technically is our default way of thinking, our way of perceiving the world that we've come to understand. But a lot of that is self-protective. So in there also lies all of our coping mechanisms, our ideas, our beliefs about other
Yeah.
people, our idea of ourself and that self-importance, when other people's intentions are towards us. When we quiet that down, that leaves space for us to have a different way of thinking. And so the talk therapy component of it is let's talk through what some of that opportunity might look like. Let's question some of the definitions and the ideas and the belief systems that have been held onto so tightly that there's been no space for something different to be in there. Now we've created space. What are some new ways of thinking that can lead us to the outcomes that we want? And even that baseline definition or idea of what do you want for your life? Most people don't stop to think about that. They are told this is what you should want for your life. And so off we go on that path until one point we wake up and we're like, what is this life? This isn't what I want at all. But we feel like we're so far into it, there's no shifting, changing, getting out of it. Psilocybin allows for the quieting of the brain to be able to see different opportunities and different perspectives and really make some of those changes to ultimately get to that
So
life.
what you're saying is that the drug psilocybin
Mhm.
essentially enables the talk therapy to work effectively. Is that fair?
I would say that's mostly fair. However, I would also say that there are plenty of people that utilize psilocybin mushrooms that don't have what we're going to call a traditional talk therapy with
Yeah.
it that still get significant benefit. It's really almost more about the individual themselves. What do they want out of that
Yeah.
experience? Do
Okay.
they want to understand things differently? Do they want to question things? And then, if so, then a therapist, a facilitator, or an individual who's just doing their own seeking or their own journey, as they might call it, can certainly change those things without having to sit in what we would call traditional talk therapy. But that is the enhancement of within our company, the two going hand in hand.
Yeah. And I mean, to what extent have your personal values shaped the way that you've approached building this business? Because it's a kind of an odd move. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people in mental
Yeah.
health. I mean, you're the first one that I've spoken to that's come up with an idea about growing mushrooms. I mean, there might be other people. I've not met them. But so what, tell me about that decision to go down that road. I mean, how did your values, the way you feel about this influence that decision with you?
Mhm. Well, I appreciate that question. So mine, just to kind of give a little bit of a historical like, connection to how I ended up here, I was raised in a home that was very rigid. It was military and it was a tightly held religious belief system, traditional Christian belief system, but a rigid one. We did not just go to church on Sunday, we'll put it that way. And so my world was very black and white. I was raised with the recognition that everything is black, white, right, wrong, life,
Right.
death, heaven or hell, every single thing you do. So take that information. I was also the oldest, still am the oldest of seven kids in the family. So that,
Wow.
a lot of that first child, firstborn
Yeah.
personality is definitely ingrained in there. But fast forward that to kind of where I went in my initial career, and I worked in sales for a long time, specifically medical sales, a lot of time in the orthopedic and sports medicine industry, certainly in physical rehab industry, componentry, that sort of thing. Within all of that, what I enjoyed about sales was never about the product, it was about the people.
Yeah.
And I worked
Yeah.
as regional sales manager, national sales manager, a lot of different management of teams and people. And what was always interesting to me is what motivates people. Why do we do what we do? From a baseline sales perspective, it's I've met this person, I have this thing that I'm supposed to convince them that they need. So, how do I define their pain point and show that this is going to help them? And what I really came to understand is sales is not really about the product. Yes, that's a pain point, but it's a pain point for a specific reason. If we're talking about a knee brace, it's a pain point for the physician in that they want their patient to have a great
Yeah.
outcome from the surgery, and the knee brace can complement that. And then it's a pain point for the patient because they don't want to wear a knee brace at all, but certainly not forever. And so how do I get through this rehab as quick as possible and,
Yeah.
do away
Yeah.
with the brace? So it's about people. And when I started really looking at, again, what do I want for my life? And my husband was also in this medical sales industry, and these were conversations we were having. We don't want to do this forever. We don't want to spend our lives traveling. We had a family and wanted to be home and enjoy each other and the kids. And so, what else is there that really capitalizes on where our strengths are and what we want? And that's where mental health became
Right.
the obvious, I guess, answer to that. So we wanted to work with people, help them to find those pain points for themselves. And so go get a master's degree, work as a therapist, and realize this is a circle. We're going round and round and round. I see somebody and we talk about something and we have this conversation. I'm using all my, CBT and DBT and all the T's that you're given in counseling school, and realizing they come back the next week and we have the same conversation. And it's not because I'm not telling them tools, and it's not because they don't necessarily want change, but it's because the human brain is patterned. And in order to break out of some of those patterns, you have to get out of those thought loops. When we look at something
Yeah.
like depression, depression is being stuck in a negative thought loop that they don't see anything out, a way out of. And the way to change that is not by taking pharmaceuticals that impact serotonin, because it's not a serotonin issue. It's a neuroplasticity issue. So going back to science and looking at that research, how does the human brain work? How is kind of the idea of thought formed? That's where we move from, we've got to get away from just talking about things into structurally changing the brain. What is another option? And,
And,
the research behind psilocybin is
and
there.
before, I mean, we'll just explore a bit more of that in a second, but just to take one step back, you talked about how you learnt a lot about people's motivation when you were,
Yeah.
that was the words you used. I mean,
Yeah.
just clarify that. I mean, what did you learn about people's motivation? Because the whole thing about motivation, I've always felt, is really, really important. I mean, if people are motivated to do something, there's a reasonable chance they can achieve it. If they're not motivated, I mean, they probably won't. I mean, what was it? What
Right.
was it? What were your conclusions about that piece around motivation? Because certainly, things like motivational interviewing, those are sort of talking therapy techniques developed for people that are trying to get off, to deal with substance abuse and what have you. And
Right.
what was your take on the motivation piece?
I think when I look at the way I would define motivation is what moves somebody in a certain way. Humans are very intelligent. We always do something for a reason. Now, we might not really like the reason that we do it
Yeah,
because oftentimes we do things because they're habitual, because they are patterned ways
yeah,
of
yeah,
thinking.
yeah,
But when we look at human motivation is always towards number one, survival. And survival at this point in our history is not about necessarily building a cabin on a plot of land and, farming and raising chickens. Some people get to still do that. However, it's more so now, even within the farming industry, it's social. What do other people think of me? How do they respond to me?
Okay.
So when we look at why people are motivated to do things, it's always about that response. What am I going to get out of this? Every motivation, every relationship is transactional. From a business relationship to a significant other relationship, parent, child, neighbor, whatever it might be, every human relationship is transactional. And that's not good or bad, it's just factual because that's how we survive. So if the relationships we have are transactional and we look at why people do the things that they do, it's because they want to survive. And in that survival, a part of it is what do you think of me? If you think that I'm smart, then there's something that you can get from our relationship and that will be beneficial. If you think I have a knee brace that's going to help you and help your patients think that you're a better doctor because you have this process, then that again, that's going to have more patients come to that doctor and that doctor is going to ultimately get what they want. So that human motivation piece of it is why are we doing what we're doing? And that is different for different people. Some people are highly motivated by a title, others are highly motivated by finances, others are highly motivated just by the number of people that they can say like them. If they can go to bed feeling like they made somebody else feel better. Everybody has different motivations, and that's what I was really understanding about humans as a whole through that sales process. And it's true even now. But now it gets to be how do I help you recognize what those motivations are for you, and if those motivations are actually yours, or if they are ideas that you've inherited and taken on as yours, and
Yeah.
that then is where the conflict can come in.
Yeah, and that's where people pick up a lot of negative stuff, don't they?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So you mentioned about the importance of flexibility, cognitive flexibility, and
Yeah.
the kind of the I mean, what was going through my mind as you were speaking is people get into a kind of doom loop of thinking about things in negative ways and they can't shake that off or can't escape that. So how does what you do help people move through that then? So just give us a sense of how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cognitive flexibility is, to your point exactly, what allows us to think differently. And that is really where the opportunity for change comes in. It's also what I call mental wealth. Mental
Mm.
wealth is that ability to have different perspectives and to be open to different ideas. So if we stay in our rigid way of thinking, whatever that is for each person, then that keeps us separate, but we view it as safety. We view it as this
Mm.
is what I know, and so this is where I feel safe. So
Yeah.
when someone brings another idea, I can quickly say, oh no, that feels safe or unsafe based off of prior experiences. But we miss out on so much in doing that because that same concept that we think keeps us safe actually keeps us in a box. It keeps people in unhealthy
Mm.
relationships. It keeps people in abusive relationships. Well, I know that this will pass and tomorrow they won't be drinking and probably they won't hit me because they will feel bad about what they did today. And I don't know when the next time will come out that they will be abusive, but I'll know that it'll eventually pass. And round, that's just one example, of how destructive relationships can go. Same thing with a job. People spend a lot of time in a career or a specific job that they really don't like. It's not fulfilling to them, it's not financially
Mm.
getting them what they
Yeah.
want, but the idea of movement feels unsafe. So by using psilocybin, it impacts that neuroplasticity, which is what opens up that cognitive flexibility in conjunction with reducing blood flow to the amygdala, where fight or flight and fear and our emotions arise from, quieting that default mode network and that old rigid way of thinking, and then enhancing our executive functioning with prefrontal cortex enhancement, more focus, creativity, openness, awareness, and then the serotonin receptors being stimulated as well, where we get more of that happy mood neurotransmitter, but
Mm.
also impacts sleep and digestion and overall body functioning. So when we shift everything with how the brain is responding and how our nervous system is responding and how thought opens up, we get a chance to really be open to brand new opportunities. And that gives people an opportunity to say, okay, now that I'm more flexible in the way that I'm thinking, I can see that maybe this would be helpful. Maybe this other thing over here
Okay.
is harmful and I need to let go of it. So,
So what you're saying is that it helps change people's behavior and the way people think about things, which moves them in new directions, better directions, ideally.
yeah, yeah, healthier directions. As we think, so we are.
Yeah.
As we think, so we do. and that then is the outcome of the life.
Let me come back to the other side of the coin, which is the therapy piece. I mean, how have you, and I don't, we've never talked about this, so I don't know, and maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, I don't know, but have you adapted the way you apply therapy, if you like, to
Mhm.
to maximize the value of the fact that people are more, if you like, open-minded about things that they might do differently or more flexible about that. I mean, has therapy adapted to take account of the impact that mushrooms have on people's thinking? I mean, has that happened?
I would say with our practice, it has happened, and with me specifically, and how I work with people and how I approach people at this point, absolutely that has happened because now the conversation is not what's this one thing you want to work on in therapy, but the goal is if you're microdosing, let's deal with the things that are here to deal with that are really at the root of these issues. Now we're not touching the, floating symptoms, as I call them, and we're able just to go down to these root ideas and definitions. And the goal is not to keep people in therapy. If we think about therapy as an industry, if a therapist does not have clients, they don't have money. So, what is the motivation? And I know there's people that are going to listen to this and think it's very cynical, but to some degree, we have to be honest. What is the motivation of the therapist to really get the client to a place of not needing
Yeah,
them?
yeah, yeah. I
It
mean,
can become a very reciprocal relationship.
yeah, and it's not just therapy. I mean, consultants. You know, you see consultants. I mean, I've worked in the consultancy industry. You see consultants attempting to create dependency with clients because that's how they earn lots of money. So that's not it's not a new thing. How do you? I mean, how do you manage that though? Because that's also a disincentive for you. I mean, you're no different to any other.
Sure.
How do you manage that challenge? Because that's an interesting kind of conflict, if you like, isn't it? How do you manage that?
I would prefer to work with more people for a short amount of time that are really getting what they want out of their lives than have people that I have decided are dependent on me, and then therefore that makes me feel important. I do not want people dependent on me. I want to provide an opportunity for them to see themselves in a different way and realize that the power to make changes for their lives is within them. And here's a really cool tool that nature has given us for thousands of years that will enable them to do that in a new way and to really experience something differently and see themselves differently. So, from a business perspective, when I look at it in that regard, that's the goal. I want everybody to be able to use mushrooms, whether they use it from our company or not, to be able to put the information out there that, hey, you can think differently. You can have a different outcome for your life. Maybe the outcome and the things about your life don't change, but you view them differently. That can be another piece of it too. You don't need to go quit your job because the issue isn't the job per se, necessarily. The issue is what that job means to you, how you
Yeah.
define yourself because of it. So, to me, that's where the big shift is. So we do a lot of group therapy. We have open groups 3 times a week, and that's really a big part of our encouragement. Yes, we have 10 therapists as part of our team that also do individual therapy for people that want to do that, individual or couples. But the biggest piece that we really promote is the group therapy. And that's just part of the package. Anybody from anywhere can jump on our website, go to the groups. There's no cost associated with it. It is a resource and a tool that is there because we want people to have these conversations as they are starting to go, oh, wow, I really noticed something different today in how I was thinking. I noticed my perspective on this situation is shifting. I noticed that when that person that normally is really irritating came around, they said the same stuff, but it just didn't bother me and I didn't hold on to it.
Mm,
So that's really, I think, where our practice seeks to set itself apart is our goal is not to keep people needing us. Our goal is to provide a tool that helps them see themselves differently, understand how to use it, and then go forth and tell other people.
mm. Yeah. And what would you say I mean, you just talked about your goal. What would you say you're building towards? I mean, for
Mhm.
the purposes of the business,
Yeah.
I mean, I take your point about wanting to work with clients in a different way. What
Mhm.
would you say the goal is for the business? I mean, what would success look like to you?
Well, I mean, we certainly have financial goals for the business.
Yeah.
We have worked with individuals in 49 of the 50 US states at this point. So one of our goals is obviously to be working nationwide, and we are moving towards that. And one of the biggest goals really of the company, though, is yes, we have the mushrooms, yes, we have therapy, but the message is the biggest piece. The message is our forefront of the company, which is question your thinking. Give yourself permission to be open to new definitions, new reference points.
Mm.
Think about why you think the way that you do and create an opportunity to question some of that. And it's not about bucking a political system or a religious belief system or anything like that. It is really just about being honest about the life that we're all living,
Mm.
recognizing where the systems exist and that the system serves the system, not the individual. But the individual is a part of that and resides within it. So, how do you reside within it and also get what you want out of your life while being a part of the system that is also
Mm.
here? That's the biggest piece. So when it comes to the company, what does Grow Your Own Thoughts want? Grow Your Own Thoughts and Colorado Teletherapy Services together, we want individuals to question why they're living the way they are and give themselves an opportunity to think differently about it. And here are some tools that can be helpful in that.
It's actually about changing the way people think, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. That is the Grow Your Own Thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, that sounds like a great thing. And what would you say the opportunities are going forward? I mean, you're on a journey like all
Yep.
CEOs are, business people are. I mean, what would you say? How do you see the opportunities going forward?
Well, when we look at individuals, the opportunity is really to give individuals hope. Things can change. You're not trapped. Yes, your brain is patterned, but it's not stuck. It just needs a little shift, you know? And so, at a human individual level, that's hope. That's the opportunity to have something different. From a larger corporate level, it is really helping people understand that mushrooms are not scary. There is such a message of fear and regulation that is put around the idea of a mushroom that naturally grows in cow poop all by itself. And we take it and say, oh, we need to really regulate this and make sure that people don't hurt themselves. Well, number one, who's deciding how we define hurting themselves?
Hmm.
And number two, how tight do we need to make those regulations? Because when we look at alcohol alone, just to pick one,
Mm.
it is far more harmful, far more dangerous,
Or
negatively
smoking?
impacts far more people. Yeah, or
Yeah.
marijuana or nicotine or even food and sugar. And yet we're
Yeah.
like, off you go, please. One of our daughters works at Starbucks, and we have a lot of conversations about the amount of sugar that goes into just a
Yeah.
coffee
Yeah.
drink
It's
these
quite
days.
frightening,
And
I think, the sugar thing.
it is, and it's not a knock on Starbucks. It's everywhere. That's just one example. But that recognition of giving people autonomy, let humans make some decisions for themselves. But then the humans also need to learn to trust themselves. And so
Mm.
I published a book in 2024 on getting started with microdosing, and it's a 6-week guide to getting started with microdosing. And the first chapter is learn to trust your natural self. That's something that we have really moved away from as a Western culture anyway. It's look to somebody with alphabet soup or credentials after their name. Look to somebody in a white lab coat somewhere or, just outside of the self instead of recognizing if I understand myself, I can make healthy decisions for myself. So from that individual perspective, help people learn to trust themselves, see that there is hope for change. And on the larger corporate side, really educate from a political level, from a state level, from a local municipality level, so decision makers can have the information on how does psilocybin impact the brain. And look how it can be helpful if we get people more content within the system, operating differently, the system will function differently, and there will
Mm.
be
Mm.
lower suicide rates, lower domestic violence rates, child abuse rates, lower divorce rates. It's healthier relationships. So what serves the individual also serves the system. It just isn't often viewed that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing that was going through my mind as you were speaking is that you're not just about therapy; you're about changing the system as well, which is a much tough. Well, I mean, therapy is pretty tough as it is, but I
Yeah,
mean, even
yeah,
tougher to try and change the system.
yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a brave ambition to have a go at that, but somebody's got it. I mean, I'm a huge fan of people being ambitious about things. That's a good thing. Let me ask you about the kind of business side of things. How do you feel about building a business?
I love it.
And what is it
I
you
love
love
it.
about it?
I love it because it's big picture.
Right.
How do we, the challenge, I think, of building any business is what you and I have talked about to this point, and what a lot of your conversations are about with CEOs that you talk to. What's the starting point? What's that
Yeah.
first goal? When
Yeah.
somebody says, I'm going to
Yeah.
build a business, it's a pain point, whether it's a product pain point, a service pain point, an idea pain point. There's a pain point that an individual recognizes and says, I want to have an impact on that. And so often, though, in the building of the business, it becomes more about the system of the business and the details, the HR, the IT, the sales, the marketing, the social media. That's my biggest pain point, probably because of my
You and me
age.
both. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but it becomes more about those details, and it's easy to lose focus of what was the initial goal. And sometimes the goal needs to shift along the way.
Yeah.
So we started as a therapy practice. I didn't even know what marijuana smelled like till I was in my 30s. So the idea of psychedelic mushrooms was not in my wheelhouse whatsoever,
Mm.
except as, the government said that's illegal, so that's over in that illegal box that I just don't look at. So, starting a therapy practice and now working in the field of psilocybin mushrooms and microdosing expertise was not what we saw, but we allowed the business to shift as we saw the pain point shift and as we saw the healing of the pain point shift. So, I think from that big picture perspective, I like to make sure we stay connected to the reference point because it is so easy to get stuck in the details. I shared with you before we started our conversation, I managed to lock myself out of Google
Yeah.
Workspace as the super admin. And all I could do was send emails to Google and hope they were going to get back to me at some point. And that became very unsettling because I had no control over Google getting
Yeah.
back to me. It did not matter how many emails, if I highlighted it, sent it in caps. And I had to step back and say, this literally is not life or death. Can it potentially impact a business functioning? Yes, and I need to, as CEO, look at what other ways can we kind of mediate this along the way until we get it resolved, which thankfully we did. But it's easy to get stuck in some of those details sometimes. And so being able to come back to the big picture, what is the goal? How are we serving the customer, the client, the team members? I think that can be the challenge, but it's also the part that my brain enjoys.
Yeah. And how do you feel about decision making? I mean, I often think that the job of the CEO is to get the right decisions made. I mean, how do you feel about that kind of component of what you have to do?
I think the biggest piece is exactly the word that you said, getting the right decisions made. I have reframed that word, and to use the therapy term of reframing, right? But I have reframed that word to what is healthy and what information do I have right now? Because as CEO, it is easy to get stuck in that idea of whatever decision I make is going to have potential outcomes. And some I want, and some I definitely don't
Mm.
want.
Yeah.
But we don't always know what those are going to look like. So we have an amount of information in front of us, and we have to make a decision based off of that information and pick a path and go down it. Because if we sit in analysis paralysis, as it's often referenced, nothing gets done.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a guaranteed death. That is a guaranteed suffocation point. As long as we're moving in a direction, we can shift that movement as we go if we need to, but pick a direction, make a decision, go with it, and then make shifts along the way if you need to. Now, I think at a CEO level, one of my goals is to make a decision, really giving a lot of intentional thought to how is this going to impact the team? Because what I want to do is minimize the impact for the team if possible. If I say, okay, we're just going to pick this new system and go with it, and I tell everyone we're going with this system, start using this, and then, a week later, I'm like, actually, I don't really like that. Let's do something else. You build in time to kind of allow for some of that shifting and see how things go. But sometimes you just make a decision like, okay, this is what we're doing, and then you go with it. But that grace, as I'll call it, to allow for flexibility as we maneuver through various things. The industry that we're in, psilocybin, is a very shifting industry.
Mm.
Even Colorado has dialed back on some of its allowances for personal use just in the last 30 days. In other states, more is opening up. The federal government, there's more conversation. So I think part of being in a shifting industry is allowing for those shifts to happen along the way. So I try to stay away from the word, is this the right decision? And instead say, this is the healthiest decision I see right now with the information we have. And so we'll go
And
this
what
route.
about the flip side? When you get it wrong, when you make the wrong call, or
Yep.
when things don't turn out the way you expect. I mean, what's your take on I mean, one of the things I love about entrepreneurs is they're much more open about making mistakes. I mean, politicians are a good example. They never admit they've ever done anything wrong.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to see any change in that world where
Yeah.
entrepreneurs are much quicker to say, that didn't work. That was a
Yes.
daft idea. Maybe I need to try something else. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think the first is being willing to own that and to say, well, that did not go like I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
That is not what I thought was going to happen. And we have definitely had some of those, and some of them, have a pretty high financial tag tied to them. Various expos or different things that we've done that there was a lot of money invested to have minimum to negative outcome from it from a financial standpoint. But then it's also looking at it and saying, okay, what did we learn? What can we take away from this that again gives us more information for that next time? Because if we're making decisions based off the information provided at the time, then some of that comes from historical data
Yeah.
of things that did not work out. And, for instance, I'll just give one example for us. One side of our business is cultivation, providing individual sized propagators that have all of the grain and the substrate and the spores and everything in it for people to grow their own psilocybin mushrooms. And we call it a thought box because the goal is to change the way you think, but it grows mushrooms. So we invested a lot of money a few years ago to do an event that was outdoors. And it was kind of a mental health music festival. So, very cool idea to it.
Wow.
And it did not turn out at all like we thought it would. From literally having a deer run into our vehicle on the way to the event and have, thousands of dollars of damage to the vehicle, to just the demographic not being there that we thought was going to be there, the temperatures, the environment, everything, we ended up leaving early. And then we said, okay, what can we learn from this on the drive back in our smash car? What are we learning from this? And number one was our system, our propagator system, does not do well at outdoor events. It doesn't tolerate being outdoor and closed
Mm.
up and all that because we had a lot of loss, not just from not having the sales we thought we would, but from the items, the product
Yeah,
itself.
yeah, yeah.
And so we don't do outdoor events anymore. We also don't do events that we have an event of that size that we haven't had an interaction with that particular promoter before. So again, that's just a couple examples from our business, but you take that historical data and say, what can I learn from it? It didn't go how we thought it would. So we're going to make a shift and do something different in the future. And that's part of the growing. If you always stay back in fear though of making a wrong decision or
Mm.
feel like you don't have all the information, then again you hit stagnation and there's no opportunity for the company to grow and you miss opportunities for other things. So.
Yeah. I mean, what would you say your approach to decision making? What would you say that says about you as a leader?
Well, I would hope that what the team would see about me as a leader, my goal in that is that they are taken into account when decisions are made. This is not what does charity think is the smartest thing to do right now? And a lot of the decisions are made with other individuals. It is rare that I just say, this is a decision I'm making, I'm going with it.
Mm.
It is most common that I talk with other individuals about it. My husband also works within the company. He runs all of the cultivation. So, of course, we talk on a daily basis. So his input is put into the decision making, but other team members as well. If it's about expos, I'm going to go talk to the team that runs the expos. Hey, we're thinking about doing this. How do you think it's going to impact you?
Mm.
If it's a therapist, I'm not necessarily going to go to all 10 therapists, but I have individuals within that aspect of the team that I'll say, here's what I'm considering, is this something, what do you think about how that would work for you? If I change this, how does that work for you and how you're working with your clients? And it's not, you don't do that in every decision, of course, but it's always taken into account.
Mm.
If I'm going to create a new system, or if I'm going to say, hey, I think we should introduce a new product, that's a big one. That impacts the website development team, our Salesforce team, the shipping and handling team,
Mm.
the receiving, where are we going to acquire said pieces for this new product, then there's a lot of people that are impacted. So all of that is taken into account, and I would, hope that that's what the team sees in me as a leader. That
Mm.
this is not the charity show. This is Colorado Teletherapy Services and Grow Your Own Thoughts, and each person has their role, and that's what makes the company function. And at the end of the day, what is it about for the client experience too? So just because I think it's a great idea, if that's not going to enhance the client experience, and I'm looking at revenue and not the client experience, there's a balance in those things.
Mm.
Revenue has to be there, but also how does that impact the client? For instance, just with where the financial culture is right now. Shipping expenses have gone up
Yeah,
significantly,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
significantly. And so the discussion, within our top team members was, do we increase prices or do we add a shipping fee? We have a good amount of business here in Colorado. This is really our baseline of our clientele was right here in Colorado. So we decided, yes, we have to implement shipping fees, but we're not going to increase the cost of the product. And if people want to come and pick something up, then they can do that and there's no shipping fees and the cost has stayed the same. So the propagator, the thought box system is the exact same price no matter where it goes. But if you're in Florida, then you're going to have a shipping fee attached to
Yeah.
it. However, what we also have done with our shipping is make sure that when they receive it, they can tell there's a lot of care and a lot of thought that goes into how this is shipped, from wrapping and ice packs and insulation and second day, all these things that
Yeah,
are
yeah,
happening
yeah.
so that
Yeah.
their experience is still positive with it and they see that value.
And let me ask you about another balance I think is difficult to strike, and that's the balance between sort of short-term priorities and longer-term goals. I mean, what's
Yeah.
your, I mean, I always felt that was a difficult challenge, to balance those things. You've got to sort this fire out today, but actually in the medium to long term, I want to do X.
Right.
I mean, the short term often sort of sucks up a lot of energy that you need for the long term. I mean, how do you sort of balance that?
Yeah, that that is a fair question. So, because the short term is the immediate pain.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
experiencing this pain today. It's incredibly uncomfortable, and I need to make it stop and go away. So, how do we resolve it? The first thing I look at when we have a pain point is where is the pain point coming from? Is there something within our efficiency or operating procedures that we can change so that it does become a long term, no longer an issue long term? And if it's going to be a long-term out process, then how do we at least alleviate some of the pain right now? What can we do differently right now while we're moving towards that longer term goal? Or you're just going to have to suck it up right now because this is being shifted and we are going to move towards that long-term goal. I think anytime we get too caught up in focusing on discomfort right now, that's where we get really short-sighted. And
yeah.
if we continue just being short-sighted in how we operate a company, there's not going to be a long-term outcome for the company. But that parallels human individuals. I'm uncomfortable right now. How do I fix it? Oh, I go eat ice cream. Okay, well, does that get you what you want to actually feeling healthy and feeling like you want to get up and go to the gym in the morning or go for a hike or have your brain functioning at optimum capacity? Sometimes yes, right? But not if we do it every night. And so looking at, is this just something that I'm feeling uncomfortable with,
Mm.
or is it something within the company that needs to shift? And if so, looking down the line, to your point, what is the long-term ramification of making a major upset right now? Maybe it needs to happen, but usually that's not the healthiest outcome. Versus, okay, where are we sitting at now? How do we change it so this is no longer an issue going forward? So,
Let me ask you about something that's a bit more sensitive. That I mean, the microdosing thing, the mushrooms thing, as you've already alluded to, is kind of a politicized issue, isn't it?
yeah.
Um, I mean, how have you? I mean, how have you managed that issue? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, you know, people can have quite polarized views about stuff like that. You're
Yeah.
kind of in the middle of that because you're saying we need to do this because. How have you managed, if you like, the communication stuff around that? Because there must be plenty of people that would be unhappy about what you're doing for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind in that is that the most polarizing event that we have ever participated in as a company was a local, it was a statewide, it was held locally here, addiction and mental health conference.
Right.
Because when we look at the idea of addiction, people get very focused on the substance
Yeah.
rather than being focused on addiction as a result of thought connected to painful things that have happened, and it's a coping mechanism. They focus on the substance. So we're at this event, and this was an excellent example of this polarizing conversations. We'd have some people that come and said, I'm so glad you're here because psilocybin is not addictive. It has been shown over and over and over within research that it's not addictive. Not only is it not physically addictive, it's not psychologically addictive either. That is not how the brain responds to psilocybin. It's not this, you do a large dose and then tomorrow you're like, oh, I want to do that again. Again, maybe unless you're at Burning Man. So, but other than that, when we're talking mental health, that's not how it works. And so even people that might be using psychedelic mushrooms in order to shift their thinking at certain times, it's not an addiction. And so individuals would come to our booth and I gave a lecture there and they come up and have conversation after, I'm so glad you're here. And then other individuals would come and say, I can't believe you're here. How dare you come into this space
Yeah.
of where we're trying to help people with addiction and, bring a drug. And my response to them is, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Tell me what addiction means to you. What is, tell me
Mm.
your understanding or your experience in that. And I think that's what has allowed us to sit in this space is because we don't sit in a fear of people not agreeing. It's okay if you don't agree.
Mm.
It really opens up opportunity for conversation if you don't agree. But it does not, whether or not you agree as an individual with psilocybin or microdosing or whatever mental health that we're talking about, that does not impact my belief on it. And my belief is what I have because of what I've seen. I've worked with over 1,000 people who have utilized psilocybin microdosing and had exceptional outcomes in their life.
Mm.
Some more exceptional than others, but everybody gets a shift because you're impacting the brain. If you're a human on this planet, you have modified thinking. Welcome to the human condition. You can benefit from having the brain quiet down a little bit and restructure. But no one's going to take that information and that knowledge and that understanding away from my brain and how I perceive things. So being willing to step into those hard conversations is part of what I enjoy about it.
Right.
Maybe that sounds a little sick in some way, but that's also probably what allows me to sit in the CEO position is I'm not afraid of having those conversations. When you connected and said, would you like to talk about this on the podcast? I'm like, yes, absolutely. This is
Mm.
literally what excites me and gets me motivated on a daily basis is to have these exact conversations and to allow people to come with their questions and their different understandings and sometimes the resistant, emotionally resistant
Yeah.
conversations as well, and be able to say, that's okay. I'm okay with that because now you have some different information and maybe you'll understand it a little differently. And if you
Mm.
choose not to, you can also do that, but it doesn't hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, lots of CEOs I've spoken to talk about the importance of storytelling and about creating the
Mhm.
a narrative and then telling stories that enhance that narrative. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, given what you've just said about the fact that it's a, conflicted area, for want of a better way of
sure.
describing
Yeah,
it. I mean, have you, do you sort of use storytelling approaches
yeah,
to kind of help people understand the value of, I mean, what's your take on that?
absolutely. Outcomes are not what we measure scientifically. Outcomes are what has changed in somebody's life. And I have seen individuals go from here's my roasting pan full of medication bottles that the VA has given me for my PTSD. And by the way, I'm also in the middle of a divorce and trying to get partial
Mm.
custody of my kids. I'm pretty sure I just want to kill myself because nothing's working. And to be able to talk with that individual, introduce microdosing, help them find their dose. They go, we have connection, or and this individual has connection with a company every few days or so for a while, and then it's once a week, and then it's, more spread out. And then to hear on the back end, I'm on zero medications. I have a relationship with my kids. I sit by my fire pit outside and have a beer every once in a while and just enjoy the evening,
Mm.
listening to nature. My divorce is still going the way it's going, but I don't get all caught up in what my ex is trying to do. That's an outcome.
Mm.
That's a life change. Those are the things that are motivating of that's one person. But for that one person, that's significant. And there are hundreds of stories like that from I'm texting you because I'm just standing in my kitchen feeling happy right now, and I didn't know if I would ever feel happy again. Those are the things that make a difference. And happiness is such a momentary feeling,
Mm.
but it's a moment that so many people were constantly pursuing,
Mm.
which is a whole other conversation for another day. But
Yeah.
those things that this is how it's changed my life. This is how I think differently. This is how I focus on relationships differently. Life is stories because stories are individual people's experiences. And yes, to answer your question in the short way, that is the essence of what we do and how I, as CEO, know this works. Nobody's going to tell me it doesn't work. Nobody's going to tell me it's a placebo. Nobody's going to tell me, you really have to go do large dose sessions to get benefits. Nope, I've seen it. I hear the stories. And
Yeah,
so being able to share those stories is an encouragement to others. And that is something that we've tried to put some of those stories on our social media accounts and on our YouTube channel at
yeah,
Grow Your Own Thoughts, because this is where I was, and this is how I'm experiencing life now.
yeah, yeah. And it must, I mean, I guess you must get a real sense of satisfaction being able to help people make those sort of shifts and improve their lives. I mean, that's, I guess, partly why you do it, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Paul, I am not wired for things that don't work. So it's, that is for sure. And when I see something working, again, what's the definition of working in that specific situation? Are people getting the benefits that they want? Are they seeing the changes in their life? Are they experiencing life differently? Yes, then it's working. How do we help it work for more people?
Yeah, and one of the things I like about both mountaineers and entrepreneurs is that they are very pragmatic, actually. Does it work? Yeah, good. If it doesn't work, we need to do something about it. That's
Yes.
partly what I like about those worlds. I guess that's why I perhaps
Yeah.
fit in there, maybe. Well, a couple of last questions before we wind up. If you were starting from scratch, is there anything you'd do differently, perhaps?
That's a tough question because I think really what we've learned at this point has come through those experiences.
Right.
So much of how people end up in certain places is based on things that they had no control over.
Yeah.
I had no control over on when I appeared on this planet back in 1976. I have no control really to a large degree on when I'm going to leave the planet. Did not know that I would be in this time in history where psilocybin is becoming more accessible in the state of Colorado, where, Colorado as a state was the first to allow for personal use in an unregulated aspect. In the mental health industry, after decades in, orthopedic sports medicine, medical sales. So there's so many things that have to come together to end up where we are that I can't look back at any specific point and say, oh, I would just change this, because when you change that, it changes other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's really where I look at how we end up now. Just like there's goals, there's ideas of where we see ourselves in the next year and 5 years and 10 years, but that also depends on a lot of things that are outside of our control. So you shift and you go with it with the information you have. But I think that if I was going to go back to one thing that I learned now that I try to hold on to, it is exactly what we talked about earlier, and that's don't get stuck in the small immediate stuff.
Mm.
Is this life or death? Does this really matter? Because there are things that we deal with in our practice that are life and death, and those need to be seen in that regard. But boy, that gives reference to other things that are not.
Yeah.
Getting locked out of Google Workspace, uncomfortable, yes. Disconcerting, yes. Life or death, no.
Yeah.
And so recognizing where you have control, touching those things, but allowing for there to be fluidity and flexibility as well.
It's very interesting you say that. I mean, one of my mottos has been, throughout my entire life, has been, I don't worry about things I can't do anything about, which is sort of similar to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Focus on the things that you can do something about is, where I see it. One last question. If you were to offer a bit of advice to a rookie CEO sort of starting out, what would it be?
Yeah. Give yourself permission to not have all the answers, and to be okay with things not always turning out the way you think they're going to,
Mm.
but also trust yourself. There's a lot of doubt that can come in when it's
Mm.
you are the one that everybody looks up to and says, okay, what are we going to do about this? And they're like, I don't know, I'm just a person. How do I know how to, answer all these questions? But step back, breathe. You're in the position that you're in for a reason. Whether you've been chosen to be there or you've put yourself there through something that you've built, you're there for a specific reason. What can you bring to the table?
Mm.
What can you offer? Thinking about all the people around you and all the people that it's going to impact. But then don't sit in fear of not making the right decision. Make a decision, go forward with it. If it needs to shift, it shifts. You're not stupid because you made a decision that didn't have the outcome that you wanted. You're just a human. And next time you'll make a different decision. And now you have more information. So trust yourself and be okay with saying, okay, it didn't go how we thought it was going to go. Let's do something different.
I mean, Charity, I think that's a great piece of advice to end on. So thank you for that. And thank you for making time to come and talk about it. I mean, it's a very new area, actually. It's not
Yeah.
something I know much about, and it's very interesting, actually. And I really appreciate you making time to talk about it in the way that you have, because I mean, it's not as well known over here in the UK, but that is probably going to change, would
It
be my
will.
guess. So
Yeah.
thank you for coming and talking about it, and good luck going forward. Because I mean, it's great that you're able to help people that haven't, that where other approaches haven't worked so well. It's great that you can, add a bit of value to that, and maybe help people in ways that you perhaps couldn't have done in the past. I mean, that's a really good thing. So thank you for coming and talking to us.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for reaching out and look forward to staying connected, maybe having more conversations in the future.
Look forward to it. See you, Charity.
Take care.
Bye bye.